In its simplest form, value means how light or dark a color is. If color is a chassis, then value is the engine. Not sure that analogy works. But allow me to explain how important value is. But before I do, I'd love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks. So value is dark and light. Well, it's light and the absence of light. How an object interacts with that light gives us information about what that object is. For example, an object with a matte material like skin will diffuse light over its surface. Diffuse means to spread out. But if an object is made out of a reflective material like metal, then more of the light will be reflected. Perhaps the shape that's most influenced by value is a sphere, like this. Except this isn't a sphere, it's a circle, right? I can apply some color to it and make it pop a little more, but it doesn't really give that much information about it. Now let's apply it a bit of value. With just 3 values, we can see that this circle is looking a lot more like a sphere. We can see where the light is coming from because this area is the lightest and this area is the darkest. We can add a shadow here to sell that even more. But it's not just about showing the light source, it's about showing what the thing is made of. So like with this skin example, this sphere is looking like it's made out of a matte material. But if I add a highlight to it, then the information changes. It now looks a little bit more reflected. Another useful thing that value can do is it can indicate a change in material. So for example, if you've got a hand like this and it becomes wet, then you can sell that by adding additional highlights like this. And now it looks a bit more convincing that it's wet, because water is a reflective surface sitting on top of the previous matte surface. Now when people talk about value, they often refer to a value range. What this usually means is that you take X amount of values and you put them next to each other, and that is your value range. And most of the time the standard is 1 to 9, with 1 being the lightest and 9 being the darkest. But in reality you can have 1 to any number of different value ranges that you want. But I'm going to give 2 different value ranges. The first is going to be a value range from 1 to 4, and the other one is going to be 1 to 9. The reason for that is because I know that some people can be a bit intimidated by having so much choice and where to put the different values, so I'm going to focus on the value of 1 to 4. But the rules apply to both. If you want to download these 2 value ranges, as well as get a PDF of the breakdown of this video, there are free downloads on my site, which I've linked in the description below. So if value is something that is very new to you or that you're quite intimidated by it, then I recommend going for the smaller value range because you've got fewer things to pull from. So the first thing to do is to just draw a simple shape, or just draw something that we're going to add value to. The next thing is to figure out what direction our light source is coming from. We're going to do a really basic light source, a directional light source, and you can pick any direction that you want. Once you've got that direction, the side of the shape that is closest to that light source, we're going to use the value of 1, which is the lightest value. And then on the opposite side of that shape, we're going to use value number 4, which is the darkest. And 2 and 3 we're going to put in the middle. So value 2 is going to be close to value 1, and value 3 is going to be close to value 4. So you should have 4 separate values going from lightest to darkest on your shape, and in comparison to before, you can see the information that it gives. So we can see that that shape is being lit from that particular direction, and that is value in a nutshell. And if you decided to use the value range of 1 to 9, exactly the same principle is applied, except you've got many more steps in between the lightest and the darkest, so the gradient is going to be a lot smoother. Another thing to note is that if you wanted to use your own value range, they don't have to go from pure white to pure black. They can be any range you want. You can pick the start and end points wherever you want them to be. Now, if you chose the 1 to 4 value range, then you created what is known as a high contrast painting or illustration. High contrast basically means there are fewer tonal variations in the value, whereas low contrast means that there are greater variations in the value. So this, for example, is a high contrast illustration, and this is a low contrast illustration. Whichever one you choose is up to your personal preferences, really. Now, if you've been drawing or painting for a while and you've received a critique, you may have heard something along the lines of, you need to fix your values. It's common advice, and it's usually exactly what a painting or illustration needs, but how do you fix them? Well, if you have Photoshop, you can proof your colors by hitting Ctrl and Y, which will turn things black and white. This isn't always the most accurate way of doing things. So the two other options that you've got, you can create a black layer that you sit on top of everything else, and then change the mode to saturation. And the final one is you can click on image, go down to mode and change it to grayscale, and that'll do the same thing. If you're a traditional artist, it's a little bit harder to do, but you can take a photo with your phone and apply a filter like a monochromatic filter. I don't know if you can do that with a camera as well, but maybe you can, who knows. And that's the only way I can think of to properly check your values if you're a traditional artist. So then once you've done this, once you've got it in black and white, or if you started with a black and white drawing or painting in the first place, what you need to do is step away from it. So if you're in Photoshop, you can just zoom out until it's really, really small. If you're a traditional artist, you just step away from it. And what you're looking for is if the major forms of the painting or illustration are still readable, so you can still see kind of what's going on, then your values are good. If they start to blur and you find it more difficult to figure out what's going on the further away you get, then your values do need fixing. Now, what that means depends on what values you've chosen, because all values are relative. You might need to increase the contrast a little bit more, which means increase the differences in the values between one object and the next. So if you've got a person standing against a background and the values are very similar, you might need to adjust those values so they're a little bit more different, because that way the things in the foreground can stand out against the things in the background and therefore make it easier to read. And it's the same with like if you're drawing the face and it just looks a little bit flat, then increasing the contrast. So for example, if the light is coming from the top, you would expect to see shadows under the brow, under the nose, maybe under the lip as well. So increasing the value of that, so making those a little bit darker, will help increase the contrast and make things stand out a little bit more. But there are no fast and hard rules when it comes to this. It kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. But broadly speaking, as a general rule, you want the lightest values that are closest to the light source and the darkest values that are furthest away from the light source. So now that you've got these basics, it's time to practice. So first thing to do is to take a photo of something or to get a drawing that you've already done and paint it only using values. No colors allowed, so it's just black, white and gray. This will help you forget all the noise that color can sometimes give and just focus purely on the values. If you've just stuck with the value range of 1 to 4, and you've practiced with that for a bit, then slowly increase it to 1 to 5, 1 to 6, 1 to 7, and add more tonal variations to your drawings just to sort of get used to things like blending and making things a bit more complex, and just slowly but surely over time increase the complexity, and you'll start to understand value a bit more and get used to how you can apply it to your work. I mean, at this point it's over to you, and it requires a lot of reps to sort of get your head around it, as with everything in art. But value isn't that intimidating. Once you get your head around the core concepts and you start to apply it a bit more, then it becomes your ally. It really, really helps you. So I hope that helped explain what value was and how important it is. But if you have any questions, then let me know in the comments. Again, you can download that PDF for free on my site, link below, and I'm sure it'll help. I've been Brinkley, have fun drawing, and I'll see you in the next one.